What's up, guys? Mason the Brock Henderson here, and time to talk about the final four episodes of What If because it all came together pretty nicely. On the whole of it, I would say What If is a fun little adventure. Whether or not it's going to tie into the rest of the MCU, we still have yet to see. Now, I personally think it's something they could do. I don't necessarily think it's something they're going to do though, because they've already got a whole lot to deal with the whole multiversal thing going on. So I feel like these stories are going to be fun little side stories, and they already have a season two planned. So I feel like it's just going to be something fun for the Watcher and this group that he's gotten together. I don't know if he's going to get them to get together again for season two, or if it's just going to be a completely different story. But with that being said, talking about episode five, right? No, episode six first. Yeah, episode six is where I left off, I think, in the reviews, and it's the one where What If Killmonger rescued Tony Stark. In this one, I think it was probably one of the more disappointing episodes for me, because I like the premise. I like the idea that Killmonger rescues Tony Stark. What could that imply? What could Tony become from that moment? Because now, instead of saving himself and creating Iron Man, now he's being rescued by a bad guy. What would that do? Now he's going to start working with a bad guy. Is that going to turn him bad? But ultimately, they don't really do anything with it. Essentially, they basically just take it as though Killmonger decided to use Tony to achieve his goals. Because Killmonger, this is exactly the same. Which I was kind of hoping that we would get an idea as to why that changed in this timeline. But we never find out why he decided to use Tony in this timeline instead of trying to, do what he did in the MCU timeline, where he uses Claw, goes along with him, and then turns his back on him to get on the side of the Wakandans. We don't understand why that happens in the first place. And I feel like that's kind of the big issue I had with this episode, is that there's a lot of open-ended why. Why did that happen? Why did he still have the same motivations? Why is he seemingly not doing anything to his uncle, who he knows killed his dad? Did he not find out in this timeline? So yeah, it was a lot of stuff that I'm just kind of like, I feel like they could have done a bit more. I like the premise, but I feel like the premise left itself up to so much more potential that they didn't really tackle. But I mean, overall, it was fine. Getting to hear Michael B. Jordan voice Killmonger again, and Killmonger's such an interesting villain, and he's got a sympathetic backstory, so you kind of feel for him. And so much so to where some people actually treat him like he's the good guy, even though he's not, just because of the cause that he's fighting for. It's like all of a sudden, all the evil things that he's doing doesn't matter because, well, he's fighting for a good cause, right? He's fighting for the little guy. That completely excuses all the murder that he's doing, right? But yeah, so it was nice to see some of these characters interact. Again, anytime T'Challa is on What If, it's always good to hear Chadwick Boseman voice him one more time. Since we're not gonna get it anymore, and it is sad. But that it just made those episodes stand out a little bit more when we did get to hear him, and I'm glad that they got him to do more than one episode. He's been involved in quite a few throughout the season. But yeah, overall, for that episode, just story wise, would have liked to see a bit more. And then we get to probably the worst episode out of the entire series. And I don't know. Again, it's another premise that you would think, could this be interesting? What if Thor were an only child? What if Loki was not taken in by Odin? Which it does kind of beg the question, okay, but what about Hela? Is she just not in the picture at all? We're just not going to talk about her in this episode. It is kind of weird. That's like, what if he's an only child? But is he still an only child? But no, I mean, it was just a fun kind of side story, some funny moments, little dumb at times, but yeah, just Thor. I like the idea that Thor without Loki doesn't become more mature. He doesn't grow up, and he's still kind of a childlike mentality because Loki made him become better. Because Loki was constantly trying to basically take the throne away from him. So because of all of that, he had to grow up quicker. He had to become more mature quicker. Whereas in this, we see without Loki there to challenge him, he's just woohoo, college party frat boy. I mean, I guess, I get the idea, but again, so much potential, so much that I would like to see that challenged a bit more. What if Loki weren't involved, but then he has to go against Hela by himself? Now Loki's not involved. What other aspects of what we've seen in the MCU would have played out differently if Loki weren't his enemy, were more of just like, like we saw, kind of a brother from another mother, like that kind of aspect could have been interesting to explore, but they all just play it as kind of a big joke. And again, some of the jokes were funny. I did find myself laughing at some of the jokes involved, but I just, again, wasted potential for me. And it is another example of how I think Captain Marvel's not being used well because so far she's kind of been just this very uninteresting, oh, we've got a super powerful woman, and that's really all we've got is she's a super powerful woman, and that's what we want to focus on. We're not giving her much character, we're not giving her much to do outside of just being super powerful. And in this one, I mean, she's literally a Karen. She comes in and she's like, you guys are partying too much, I don't like it, I'm going to stop you. And that's pretty much it. And that's, I don't know, it really diminishes the potential for her character. And I don't really have a huge issue with Brie Larson. I know some people have a big issue with her and stuff. I don't have a personal issue with her, but I feel like she's just not doing anything with the role. And I know she didn't voice her here, but again, it's just like the writers don't know how to handle Captain Marvel. It's like she's supposed to be one of the most powerful beings in the MCU, and you just use her for, she steps in for a moment to help out and then she's gone. And you've got this whole what if series. She steps in for one moment to be, oh, I'm going to tell you stop partying, Thor, and that's the only reason she's there. She doesn't even get brought in by the Watcher for the what if team up at the end. I'm just like, why? And that does roll over into episode 8 a little bit. We do see at the end of episode 7, Ultron's bots start coming in, and we do see What If Ultron won in this episode. And I like it. I like the premise, seeing Ultron basically beat the Avengers and what he becomes, taking all the Infinity Stones. Little odd that he managed to defeat Thanos like that, cut him in half. By the way, I will say something else. They've really used the animation, I guess. The animation has lent itself to allowing them to be a little bit more violent than we get to see in the MCU movies. The zombies episode I already talked about, like seeing some of the characters we know and love get cut in half as a zombie. And then in this one, just Ultron cuts Thanos right in half. I'm just like, okay, they're being pretty violent in this show. That's kind of interesting. But yeah, it was a little weird to see, just because he has the Mind Stone, suddenly has the power to cut a being like Thanos in half who has 5 of the Infinity Stones. It's always a little weird when you talk about, like, power differential and stuff. I mean, Thor and Hulk can't really do much to Thanos, but then all of a sudden Captain America can actually hold him back for a second when he's got 5 of the Infinity Stones. It is just kind of one of those, okay, you have to sort of turn your brain off for a second and just enjoy it for what it is. But yeah, seeing what Ultron can do when he has all 6 Infinity Stones is interesting. Because he's not a being that is hampered by the power of the Infinity Stones. Thanos, even with all of his power and with all of his strength, still is clearly affected by the Infinity Stones. When he used all 6 of them, it burned his whole arm. But Ultron is not a being, he's a machine. So it's like, yeah, with the Infinity Stones, he would have a bit more power than a normal human would. And as an AI, has much more processing power as well, so he's actually able to use it in a way that it's almost like the Mind Stone is using all of the rest of the stones, and that creates a being that is so powerful that he can see through the multiverses. And it's an interesting concept, and it's the type of stuff that this show was made for. It, if you think about it too much, it may not make a whole lot of sense. Like I said, power differentials and all that, but that's kind of what the show is here for. It's like, don't think about it too much, don't put too much thought into it. This is what would happen in this scenario. Ultron gets all the stones, and suddenly now he can see into the multiverse, and he's going through all the multiverse stuff. He can see the Watcher, he can battle the Watcher. And yeah, I like the concept. Like, it really was fun to see kind of what happened after Ultron beat the Avengers. how that plan came into, basically he just shows up everywhere. He's like, oh yeah, I don't I don't like people because they cause so much chaos and so much war. And my girlfriend actually did ask the question. It's like, well, how come wanting peace means you just get rid of people? Like that seems kind of counterproductive. But to be honest, it's kind of the AI thinking of like, well, as long as there's people, there's no peace. There's no peace. So it's kind of like it's a weird thought process, and it's stuff that as humans we can't really comprehend because the moral side of us is like, okay, no, you can't just get rid of people. But from a logical processing standpoint, yes, without people, there wouldn't be war, and the absence of war to an AI would be peace. And that's kind of the weird off logical thinking that turns the Ultron into this basically I'm gonna kill everything type of AI, and is a major reason why a lot of people are like we maybe shouldn't tackle too much in the AI spectrum because this tends to be kind of a thing for AI and fictional stories is that eventually they just decide, you know what, without humans, life would be a lot better. And maybe that is true. We do a lot of stupid things. But that kind of defeats the purpose. If we're not here, then we're kind of getting rid of the reason to live. And we're getting rid of the reason why we're looking to create peace and why we're looking to get rid of conflict if we're taking away life, if that makes sense. It's a weird philosophical question that honestly is kind of turning my brain to mush just trying to compute it and talk about it. So I'm just going to go ahead and move on. But yeah, so seeing the beginning of the battle though between the Watcher and Ultron, and seeing the Watcher actually taken down a peg, because Ultron is so powerful, and the Watcher is somebody that he is probably a bit more powerful than Ultron, but he's not one to step in and fight. He's not one to step in and do anything. However, because he's the one being threatened, now all of a sudden he does have to do something. And it does kind of raise the question of like, is he truly a just and a moral persona, or is he kind of a douchebag because he's like, oh, all of these awful timelines, all of these terrible timelines, they talk about at the end with Black Widow. She's like, yeah, my timeline, everybody died. Like, you just let that happen. And he does kind of say, well, these are all of my stories. All of these belong to me. It is kind of an interesting topic of debate. But before we get to that kind of end game stuff, episode 9, talk a bit about kind of the intricacies that led up to the end. And yeah, he goes and gets this whole like group of people, and some of them are involved. Actually, almost all of them are involved with stories we've seen. Like the Killmonger from episode 6. You got the Thor from episode 7. You got Black Widow from episode. Well, actually, no, you don't even have Black Widow from episode 8. She shows up later to help, but you've got Captain Carter. You've got who was it from episode? Is it episode 2? Oh yeah, Star Lord T'Challa. So he goes and gets some of these characters from all of these different stories that we've seen. The one that kind of threw me off a little bit, he goes and gets Gamora, and it's a Gamora that has killed Thanos because she has his armor, she has his sword. She didn't show up, right? Like I'm not forgetting that. She just sort of pops in there. He's like, "Oh yes, the daughter of Thanos that killed him," or something like that. Did he just randomly go get her and we never saw that story? We never heard about what happened there? Or is that part of another story that was like a small part and I don't know. It seemed a little out of nowhere, and maybe it was just we wanted to get Gamora and we hadn't seen her the rest of the season, so it's like here's how we shoehorn her in there. Um, but yeah, so he gets this whole team together, and there are questions to be raised about the team. You've got this party Thor. Why him? When there's so many other Thors, why him? You've got all of these multiversal timelines where, they've got their Infinity Stones. You've got, these other people that are good. The Doctor Strange, he has a time stone and he uses that in the fight. Well, why not go get other Doctor Stranges that can also use their time stones? Why not get all of these other people that can help? Why specifically this team? And of course, at the end, he does say, well, this is what I foresaw. But still, it's kind of like there's got to be a better reason than that. We accepted it when Doctor Strange was like, "Oh yes, I saw 14 million different outcomes and only one of them we won." It's like, okay, I can buy that because yeah, who knows? Maybe the TVA were involved in some of those outcomes. Maybe Thanos from the past time was involved. I don't know. I don't know exactly how all that works. But this is a situation where he said he foresaw that this is what happened. Like, this is the best chance. Is that true? I don't know if I believe that. I don't know if Party Thor did more than a different Thor could have done, or, Captain Marvel could have done. I don't really buy that. So, yeah, I don't know. It's just a little weird, a little plot contrived, but I can accept it for what it is, I guess. It's not bothering me too much, but it was definitely a question that has been raised by a lot of people and is completely valid. It's like, why this team? This seems a little weird and forced. But yeah, I mean, everything involved with the stopping of Ultron, it was interesting, to see the plan they came together with, to see them try to destroy the stones. But of course, it doesn't work because the Infinity Stone destroyer that Gamora had is from a different universe, basically. So the Infinity Stones from a different universe are not destroyed by a weapon of a different universe, which does make sense. And it's something that, it is kind of a question of in the TVA, wherever that exists, the Infinity Stones are completely worthless there. So how come the stones can be used in other universes? Like, why is that a thing? I don't know if they're going to explain it or not. It would be nice if they could for those of us that maybe don't know as much about the comics, because I'm sure the comics have probably talked about why this is possible, but they haven't talked about it in movie form or TV show form. So I would like to see that happen soon. Um, but yeah, so just this whole battle between them and Ultron, and Ultron seemingly winning, but then they put Zola's consciousness, data consciousness into the body of Ultron, which of course is not the end of the battle because Zola's still a bad guy. But then Killmonger decides he wants to step in and be the bad guy. And this is the point where I was kind of like, wait a minute. Killmonger's had almost nothing to do in this story so far. And then suddenly he's just here at the end to be a bad guy. And actually, it does end up making a bit of sense because then Zola tries to take the body and the stones back from him in the body of Ultron, and they're sort of stuck in a battle between the two, and then that's where the Strange from Doctor Strange Lost His Heart steps in and sort of traps them in a little pocket dimension, which then the Watcher takes Strange and that pocket dimension back to his own little pocket dimension. So it's kind of a nice little resolution to see why we saw that story was Strange. Obviously he was heavily involved. I've seen I've seen some memes. One of them that really is true is like the Guardians of the Multiverse at 100% strength, and it's like all six of them, or is it six or seven? One of those two. And it was like the Guardians of the Multiverse at 99% strength, and it was just Strange and nobody else. I'm like, it is kind of true because without him, they surely would not have done anything. But because Strange was the only other person who became powerful enough to sense the Watcher, it would make sense that he's the only one powerful enough to take on Ultron in this form. But yeah, so to see how it all sort of connected, bringing it back to his little pocket dimension because it's secluded, it kind of gave him something to feel good about, because he made this sacrifice and trapped them in there to bring them into his own place. I don't know. I liked it. It was a nice little wrap up. It was a nice little conclusion, and I like it whenever the writing feels like it was all written for a certain purpose. And now, looking back on some of these episodes, you can see why they were building up some things that were going to come in later. So it was a nice little moment. And again, going back to the Watcher himself, we do have the moment where he talks to Black Widow and he does take her to the universe where Hank Pym killed all the rest of the Avengers. And it's kind of a nice little moment for her where now she gets to be a part of a universe where maybe not everybody is alive that she knows, but it's still a chance for her to do something more than just live in a universe where everybody except for her is dead. And it's kind of a nice thing for the Watcher to do. But again, it does raise the question of, is he truly a good guy? Or is he kind of like he's just sitting back and watching and only interferes whenever it affects him? it's kind of a moral thing, and it's weird, and maybe it's something that will get explained more the more we find out about the Watcher. The more we figure out what his character is and how he was created, how he came to exist in this world outside of the multiverse. They can see all of the different multiverses going on. But for now, the way that I see it is like we see what happens when he does interfere. We see the chaos that can be created whenever he is being interfered with. Ultron brings him into the world for a second, and just him being there, it affects everything around the world so much. So I almost kind of wonder if he's just a being with that much power that if he is involved, if he does try to essentially interfere, if his powers will basically sort of disrupt everything else around what's going on with him. So it is. I do hope we get a little bit more on him. Like I said, I know they're doing a season 2, so maybe we will figure out more about the Watcher in season 2. But I like the fact that we got to see him involved, because he did talk about, like, I can't interfere, and a couple stories where he talks like he wants to do something but he can't. And so it was nice to see him get the chance to, and see what would happen if he did get involved. But yeah, I don't know. I just like some of the setup, but I also do still have questions. But that's also a good thing, because sometimes if they answer all the questions, then there's nothing really to look forward to. So the fact that we are left with some questions about the Watcher and about why he does what he does and how he got to be in this position and all of this other stuff surrounding him and sort of the mystery surrounding the multiverse in general. I don't know. I like the setup, and I like the fact that we've got something to look forward to. And obviously we've got a few more things. We got Eternals coming out soon, I believe, and then Hawkeye and Spider-Man No Way Home. So a lot of stuff coming out soon that the Eternals are going to definitely raise some questions about why have they not gotten involved. It's another situation. Oh, we're not going to interfere until now. So that's a question. And then, of course, Hawkeye, getting his new protege. Seems like it's going to be a lot more down to earth than a lot of the stuff we've been seeing recently. Because you just think about, like, the past few things that have been released. Black Widow was something that was very much contained. It was a prequel. It was something that happened before. Falcon and the Winter Soldier, also very contained. But everything else, WandaVision dealt with all this out of this world stuff. The Darkhold's probably going to be involving a lot of this multiverse stuff. Loki, of course, involved the TVA and timelines and all of this wonky multiverse stuff. And then you've got now you've got What If that showed what's happening in the multiverse. Eternals is going to obviously be a huge multiversal thing. Probably going to be a huge multiverse type of thing. So yeah, I don't know. I'm really excited to see what's going to happen. But yeah, as far as What If is concerned, it was fun. It was enjoyable. Probably not going to play too much more. But I mean, the animation was good. Something I didn't talk about, I don't think, in the first review. The animation was good, though. Could have been a little bit more fast paced. Sometimes it felt a little too slow and a little too wonky, I guess. But the animation overall was fine. It was a little off-putting that they didn't make them look a whole lot like their characters. Some of them did look a lot like them, and some of them did not. So it was a little weird that they did that. The voice acting was perfectly fine. A lot of them did voice their own characters, but even the people that they got to replace, the actors that couldn't come back, or I guess are out of contract, like Robert Downey Jr. and Chris Evans. I mean, they did a great job. Yeah, overall it was fun little adventure, and I think that's about it for me. So let me know what you guys think down in the comment section below. What were your thoughts on What If Season 1? Let me know. We can talk about and discuss all that good stuff. Leave a like and subscribe for future What If and Marvel reviews, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace out.